Okay guys, if you already went over lessons number 153 and 154, you should have a very good feeling for the English opening already. However, we'll still have to cover how to properly play against this knight f6 and e6 variation. And this is something that is very common because anyone who plays the Nimzo Indian or systems like that are going to just try to keep it in their elements and play knight f6, e6, and if you don't know what to do, you might get in trouble. Now, on lesson 154, you saw me playing two of the engines and they both played this setup. However, since we hadn't covered it, I just decided to play with g3, and after d5, I got into this sort of position, which is not what I have prepared to play myself, guys. So right now, I'm going to show you what I have prepared for you to play it if you want to, but just as importantly is to show you how I got to prepare this for myself. Anyways, we covered how to prepare any opening on lesson 72, but let me show you guys how I did it. Here on chess.com, if you go to lessons, under lessons, you could go to analysis and you could play around with the pieces, right? So I'm going to go c4, knight f6. This is the variation that I want to prepare. Now here I'm going to go to openings, and you could see all of this is the theory with all the stats and things that you should be familiar with, guys. Now, here, as you can see, the top move is pawn to d4. However, we're preparing this as someone who has no idea how to play the queen's pawn open, right? So I don't want to play d4 and then they play d5, and this is a queen's gambit instead. So I want to keep it in my elements. And if you remember from lesson 153, we are playing this Botvinnik setup, right? With the triangle and everything else. So even against this setup, I want to play e4. And guys, if they don't do pawn to d5, you're going to continue with your setup for the most part. You're going to do g3, bishop g2, and you're going to be in your elements. But the important thing about this variation is what to do if they play pawn to d5. This is going to change everything drastically, but there are good news. If you learn it properly, and you're going to see that it's not that complicated. If you learn it properly, you're going to get a lot of people off guard because not many people know how to play this. How often do they play against the English? How often do those opponents who play the English get into this attack? And I think this is called the Mikenas. Yeah, here it is. Mikenas-Carls variation, right? So anyhow, guys, this is what I did. I went over here and I chose the theory, which I'm going to give you access to. This is the theory that I need to memorize. You're going to have access to it. And I'm going to show you 3 games where the white pieces used this setup. And this one specifically played by Jeffrey. I chose it because I decided to use this game as a model because this variation could get really tricky. And in order to avoid all of that craziness, I wanted to use a line that he used in this game. So anyhow, let's get started. I'm going to go back here just to show you. And let me start. So e6. Now I'm going to go pawn to e4 is the third top move. And then at this point, we got, look, d5, c5, d6. All of this you guys could review. But for the most part, again, you could apply what we already know from lesson 153. Now, I'm going to go into d5. And guys, the move that I chose to play is going to be e5. I reviewed some games where players like Caruana played c takes e5, but I rather keep this pawn on e6, blocking the bishop. So instead of taking, I'm going to do pawn to e5, right? Now, after pawn to e5, we got pawn to d4, and then from here, it gets really interesting. And whoever is more familiarized with these positions should have the upper hand. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on games because this is very important. And as you can see, guys, look, you have Jeffrey's game over here. You got Dubov's games. You have 3 games where Dubov played the same line against Aronian. And believe it or not, he defeated him 3 times. You have Nakamura using this line and so on. Now, if I open this game, for example, you're going to see that the game starts with e6. And guys, and I'm sorry that I'm going through the games before giving you the theory, but you're going to see how this makes sense. So after d5, notice that they played e5, d4, they take, then b takes e3. Believe it or not, all of this is theory. So it's not like they're coming up with these moves. This is already determined, right? Knight f3, e takes d4, bishop g5, and nothing to memorize yet. Don't worry about it. I just want to show you why I chose the variation that I chose. So all of this is the craziness or the moves that you have to memorize. And then you get isolated double pawns, isolated. You have to be comfortable with this. As you can see, he won 3 games like this against Aronian and so many others. So it should be okay. I like the activity of the pieces, lack of development for the black pieces. All of that is fine. However, if I take you to what I have prepared, guys, this is what I have. Jeffrey played it similarly up to a certain point. So after d4, he took, then d takes e3, b takes e3, and then here, if I go back to Dubov's game, he played d4, and so many top players, they use this d4 line, right? Well, if we go here to Jeffrey's game, he actually did knight f3, and the reason why I like it is because after b6, he went g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, and guys, this is more like what we learned on lesson 153. This is gonna keep us in our elements. And as you can see also, he won many games with it. You also can see Aronian playing this as the white pieces, Navarra playing this as the white pieces. So it is definitely a good choice as well. I just like it better because again, I get my fianchetto like in the English, and I feel comfortable with this variation. Do you have to do it? Not really, but I'm telling you why I chose this variation. Just to show you a little bit more, you're gonna see we still get this solid center. Knight d7, a4. Don't forget isolated pawn. I want to trade it because it is a weak pawn at the end of the day, right? So rook e1, bishop f4, rook b1, and the moment they did d5, then my pawn structure is fixed or improved a little bit. Knight d4, take, and guys, I'm going really fast through this part because this is already middle game. I just want to show you how to get to the middle game safely and hopefully with a small advantage. So with that said, let me just go on to the theory, to the part that I'm going to, guys, give you access. That way you can learn it and memorize it if this is something that you like. This is my theory. So I have c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6. The moment I see this, I remember to do the same thing with the Botvinnik formation. And then before we get into d5, notice that I have over here number 3, bishop b4. So that means I have to know what to do if they do bishop b4 instead of d5. I need to be familiar with it. And you could do the same thing. You could look for games played by masters. Now, another point where we have different variations is after d5, e5, you're going to see in those games that the black pieces simply went with d4, which is the main line. However, as you can see down here, they could do number 4, knight f to d7. So instead of advancing, they could just move the knight back, or they could go knight e4. Guess what, guys? We have to know this as well. Now, before we go deep into it, I know that you're going to be asking, how do I memorize all of this? Guys, the way that you do it is, once you have all of these selected, you know the line that you want to play, you need to review it over and over and over. Just go over it, reproduce it on the board. To me, it's easier to memorize it if I do it on a physical chessboard, but it is completely up to you. Once you have it saved, you just review it, review games, and it's going to stick. It should stick. There's no other way, okay? So one more time, and look, you see how I'm going back? This repetition is what's gonna get you there. So anyhow, knight c3, bishop e6, then e4, d5, I know to do pawn to e5. This is the way to go. If they go pawn to d4, then I know to take on f6, they're going to take me, then I take with the b pawn. I don't want him to take on d1. So you gotta find ways to remember as well. So I already know, okay, did I take with the b pawn or the d pawn? Well, I remember that I did not give him the option to take my queen, so it was with the b pawn. Boom. Or you could simply remember the rule that we should bring pawns towards the center. So that's another way to remember it. So b takes e3, queen f6. So all I need to do now is develop my king side to castle, and I'm going to do it by putting my knight on f3 followed by fianchetto. So knight f3, b6, g3, and then I finish my fianchetto. Guys, I left the theory here because I know from this moment on, all I need to do is simply castle. So what I do is when the theory is over, I'm going to go and look up the games. Like, again, I chose these games for you to review, and that's going to give you a better understanding of the middle game plans. So that I finished up to that point. I'm going to go back now and remember that after e4, they could also do bishop b4. Now, according to the theory here, I'm going to keep going. It says e5, I'm going to do the same thing. And then they could do b takes e3 or move the knight back. Now, if they go b takes e3, what pawn do you think we should take with? Well, this time we're going to take with the d pawn, opening up the bishop. then the knight has to move, and then we got queen g4. You cannot forget this idea, guys, and this is something that you're gonna see it in other openings like the French defense. There's some lines where you have this queen g4 hitting g7, and this is the way you remember, or the way that I remember it. The bishop in this variation, they did bishop before, the bishop left. That means g7 is not going to be defended. So we have g6, and look how bad all of these pawns are on light squares, which means the dark squares in contrast are going to be weak. So what am I going to do? Well, knight f3, continuing to develop, knight c6, and then bishop g5, taking advantage of the fact that they don't have a dark square bishop. So this is the essence, this is the main idea that I get out of this bishop b4 variation. Now, again, if I go back, instead of d5, they do bishop b4, then I have e5, and what if instead of doing bishop takes e3, what if they go knight g8? Well, the same move, guys. I'm going to go queen to g4, then g6, and according to the theory, I should be doing d4, just gaining more space, b6, bishop g5, the same idea. You see, regardless if they take or not, I'm going to be using these ideas. Now, are you going to get confused? Yes. But after you review this over and over, it's just you're going to remember it, guys. And you might, maybe you forget it in one of your games, but then you go back, review your theory one more time, and after you do it multiple times, you're just going to remember it. So bishop e7, then knight f3, bishop b7, h4, adding more support to the bishop, h5, queen f4, and I left it right here. Guys, if I activate the engine, let me see if I can go actually over here. You're going to see, look, this is already 2.26. This is a huge advantage for the white pieces. So this line, I left it here because if we lose this game now, it's not because of the opening, it's going to be because our middle game needs some improvement, right? So that variation I'm not concerned with. I already have it memorized. And honestly, I just have the main ideas, right? So you should be able to come up with the plan. You should be able to know more than your opponent if you really get familiarized with it. With that said, let me go back to the beginning. So again, at this point, after e6, I'm going to go e4. And one more time, they could do d5, to which I'm going to do e5, d4, all of this variation that you have. Or they could do bishop b4, to which I'm going to do my e5, and then capitalize on this pawn being weak with queen g4 and so on. If they take, even better. Oh, what am I doing? Okay, so this is queen g4 because they went back. But if they had taken on c3, I'm going to take, opening up my bishop, then my queen goes to g4. Remember, this bishop, I'm going to be punishing g6. They're going to have to push it. This bishop needs to be ready to capitalize on the dark squares. Now, guys, I know that you must be a little bit confused by now, but let me show you this part. After, again, if they do d5, after e5, we talked about them doing d4, which is the strongest move. But look, what to do if they go knight f to d7? Well, we're going to continue with d4. If they take us, bishop c4. And I give you here the whole variation. What if instead this knight goes to e4? Well, it is here as well. So we got knight f3. If they take, we're going to open up the bishop one more time. And these double pawns, we're going to fix them by taking on d5 at some point. Or if they take us, we're going to take with the bishop on c4. So I'm not concerned about this. And if I just activate the engine, it's going to say slightly better for the white pieces. So these lines, I'm just putting it here for you to know that you have to know them. And then if you go ahead and review the games, guys, this is all that I need to understand how to play this opening. Of course, the more you get into it, the more experience you get with it, the better you're going to be at it, but this should be more than enough. Now, let me go on to this game played by Aronian, and I'm not going to show you the whole thing because, again, you're going to have access to it, but just for you to see the same thing in action. e5, d4, they took me on c3. I'm going to get the pawn now. They're going to get with the queen. They don't want to get double pawns. And now, instead of doing d4, which is the main line, and if you look at the engine says that will be 0.70. Notice that knight f3 is not even recommended here. But if I do it, the engine is going to say almost equal, right? So we're just looking to be in our elements. So b6, g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, bishop d6, d4, and after h6, we simply castle, and we just get to the middle game, guys. Rook e1, a4, the same plan. You see, and this is what I tell you about reviewing master games. I have already seen 2 games where they do the same a4. I'm not gonna forget to do this myself. So this is a typical plan in this middle game position. So a5, rook a2. Look, I like this idea to bring the rook over. Pawn takes. Thank you for fixing my pawn structure. And then after bishop b4, notice how Aronian did not trade bishops. He decided to keep this bishop. Instead, he went rook e3. And guys, again, you could access the remaining of the game against Duda using this variation. At this point, evaluation is slightly better for white. And again, if you review lots of games with these lines, you're going to get more and more comfortable with it. So I'm going to leave it here. And again, if you want access to this study, to this, or to all of this information, I'm leaving it in the description of this video. And also let me know, guys, what other variation you think we should cover before anything else. With that said, I will see you in our next lesson.